mud on the grips, wild cherry on her lips. I've been working and trying and flirting and dying for an all night kind of kiss.
Today is a good day because we're in the middle of a Canadian winter, and coincidentally, and quite literally, I'm in the middle of a 2019 Subaru WRX STI, also known as the King of Loose Surfaces, or the gravel dirt bug, if you may, the snow roach. Not that one. Rally car for the streets, basically. And under the hood, we have the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged boxer engine producing 310 horsepower for 2019 and 290 pound-feet of torque. All of that rumbly goodness traveling through 6-speed manual transmission and to all 4 wheels through 3 differentials and the legendary rally-inspired all-wheel drive symmetrical system. It's a very good recipe and it's very good timing. And the owner of this car probably made the worst decision of his lifetime by lending me his WRX STI in the middle of winter. This particular car is a base model, STI base, meaning that we don't get some of the goodies that the limited trim gets, like the Harman Kardon 9-speaker system. We don't get blind spot monitoring. We don't get the larger infotainment screen. And for this car, we also didn't even get a wing, which now makes the car look kind of circumcised for no valid medical reason. And of course it's blue. Silly. In fact, on the Japanese market, the World Rally Blue Pearl Subaru WRX STIs accounted for 46% of all STIs sold in 2018. So if you're seeing blue Subarus everywhere you go, there's an actual reason for it. People just buy a lot of them. I'm gonna try to be a little bit more sensitive in this video because the Subi gang is one of the most devoted and defensive automotive groups on the planet. And full disclaimer, I have not experienced a Subaru until today. I've never driven a WRX STI, let alone until today. My only experience with Subarus until now was watching them getting wrapped around trees and rumbling past you in the streets. That's about it. This is my first experience in the Subaru that you want to be in. And there is a lot to like about the STI, but I'm not gonna go too in depth about the interior and the underpinnings of the car because it's an old vehicle. It's been done before in so many videos by so many creators already. So this video will focus on my experience with the car and whether it lives up to the hype for me as a person that has not driven a Subaru in their life. This particular car, as with pretty much any WRX STIs in the market that are not brand new, has been modified. It's not stock. For example, we have the Cobb Stage 420/69 tune, allegedly bumping the horsepower up to 330 horsepower. Torque unknown. We have Cadback exhaust for more rumble, of course, and some pops and bangs. And we have a whole bunch of stickers, adding a couple horsepower each. And of course, the red mud flaps, the staple, and a bunch of tints and little stuff that doesn't really matter, to be honest. And I think that's something that's important to remember, that if you go places in a blue WRX STI, especially with these specific mods, you might be perceived as that guy, that blue Subaru guy, anywhere you go by a lot of people. And I haven't never experienced anything like this in a car until today, to be honest. Even the Type R, as obnoxious as it was, straight piped and everything, I feel like the Type R hasn't been long enough, hasn't been in the pop culture consciousness long enough for people to have a stereotypical image of a Type R guy, whereas the Subarus have been around for so long in North America, Canada, and the US that I feel like everybody knows or think they know or have an idea of a blue Subaru guy. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So for better or for worse, I think the WRX STI experience and ownership, it might come with some cultural baggage, unfortunately. Just something to keep in mind, something that I personally noticed. I don't know if you have the same experience or not, but just my little insight in my day today. But I also want to talk about something a little bit more tangible, which is this interior. It's kind of infamous for being old, outdated, and have crappy materials and cheaply made and rattles and all that. And I've heard about rattles from STI owners, and the owner of this car as well. He says it does have rattles here and there. But to be honest, from where I'm sitting, it's been pretty good. It's been a very decent place to be in. The materials, yeah, they're on the cheaper side, of course, and everything is very outdated. We have the very analog gauge cluster, very primitive screen in between the two dials. We have the infotainment is fine. We have Android Auto, so that's not really a big of a deal. The seats are alright. They're not Type R seats, not even close. But they are base. They're not even Records actually, so they are base STI seats. The back seats are spacious. You can carry 5 passengers pretty comfortably. If they're not too tall, they should be very much okay. And the trunk is very, very respected. I also like this little screen above the infotainment where it shows you the boost gauge and the G-force meter, and it's pretty responsive and it's pretty precise. I do like that, and it's kind of a more primitive version of the Dodge's performance pages. They're not as nice, not as crisp, not as precise, but at the same time, it's definitely a nice to have, and it doesn't really intrude on anything else. It doesn't really interfere with the design of the interior. I don't think so. I feel like it actually adds to it, and that's quite nice. Now, what I don't like is the piano black around the infotainment screen and around the shifter, and I think this is a good example of why it's not a good idea to put piano black on high-touch areas. This is what it looks like after 2-3 years of daily use, and this is a daily driver. So it ends up just being dusty, lots of fingerprints, scratched up, all the dirt, all the food spills, any crumbs, anything that you do to piano black, most of the times it will leave some sort of a mark, and most of the time it will stay there. You will know something has occurred on that spot of piano black, whatever it is. And yeah, it looks good when it's detailed, of course, and also when piano black is not applied to high-touch areas, it stays looking pretty decent. But when you're constantly putting your greasy fingers on it, it's just not gonna hold up for long at all. And before we take this baby for a spin, I do want to touch on the driving modes and the differentials and the power delivery. So we have Sport, Sport Sharp, and Intelligent driving modes here. You push for Intelligent, left for Sport, and right for Sport Sharp. I keep wanting to call it Sport Plus, but really it's Sport Pound or Sport Hashtag because it has the pound sign right next to it. I guess that means sharp for Subaru. I don't really know what the difference is between Sport and Sport Sharp. It feels best in Sport Sharp, but I don't have a tangible explanation of what the difference is in the feel between Sport and Sport Sharp. But Intelligent is a bit more relaxed. It doesn't give you as much boost. And it's just, yeah, everything lightens up a little bit. The throttle response is a bit more leisure, and it's just not as aggressive. It's still an aggressive enough car, but it's just not as aggressive. And it's the eco mode, 14 to 15 liters per 100 kilometers, eco mode of driving. And also, as far as the differentials, we have the auto, we have the auto plus, and auto minus. So auto, the auto, if you leave it in the middle, basically what it does is it's keeping the around 60 to 40 split of power between the front and the back. If you do auto plus, it will focus more on sending the power 50-50 to front and back. And then if you do auto minus, it can send up to 70% to the rear wheels. So that's for more of a drifty, slidey fun and more of a dry pavement setting. Whereas now, I think I'll leave it either an auto or 50-50 auto plus, because it's plus temperatures and it's been raining, and now a lot of the snow and ice has melted, so it's extra slippery. Now let's actually take it for a spin. We do have a key for 2019. We still have a key. That's how you know it's quite old. But let's start her up and let's hear that rumble. Bum, 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 bum. Love it. Love it. It's definitely way too loud for my liking, but it is just appropriate. I think it's just appropriate. Let's take her for a spin. leave it in auto for now, which is the 40 to 60 split. And I'm gonna turn off traction and stability control so I can feel the car better. And we're gonna take it easy because it's icy, it is slippery. Nice. And there's also gravel too, so we'll get to see how she does in the gravel a little bit as well. It sounds great, and it has just enough power to not really be intimidating. It's actually not that intimidating, nor does it feel particularly scary to drive. It's actually very controllable and not as mind-blowing or not as exhilarating as you would expect it to be, or maybe I've been given into the hype of the rally car for the streets. It's very respectable power, but it's not gonna shock you, or it's not gonna scare you necessarily, unless you're not used to any sort of performance driving. And on these gravel roads, it honestly feels so damn capable. This is exactly where it belongs. This is where it does best. It feels in its element. It truly does. It feels like this is what it was meant to do. And when we get to the pavement, when we get to the road, it might fall apart just a little bit, but right now, on gravel road, this feels unstoppable. We have hydraulic steering, and it is very tight. It is very communicative. You feel a lot of what's going on with the wheels, and I really like that. This feels like an old car, and it definitely drives like an old car as well, for the better part of that word. But now that we're on asphalt and pavement, even though it's broken and cracked up and all that, and somewhat slippery here and there, it sort of stops being as fun as on a loose surface. And that's kind of unfortunate, right? Because I expected the STI to be maybe as fun, at least as fun on the street as it was on gravel or snow. But unfortunately, it's not the case. It's still a fun car. It's still a fun car, don't get me wrong. You can still chuck it around and toss it into a corner and have lots of fun with it. But at the same time, it's not as precise. It doesn't feel as settled as a Type R, unfortunately, right? And it's very natural to draw that comparison, because when it comes to street driving, unfortunately, I am Type R all the way. It is a very much a much more precise tool, a much more exciting car to drive than the STI on the streets. It doesn't sound nearly as good, and I would argue that it's kind of hideous, at least in the 9th gen iteration with all its flaps and wings. But it is just a better street car, a better road car. But if you do like the sedan look, of course, and if you want that all-wheel drive, you live in an area where it snows a lot, it might actually make a lot of sense for you to get something like this, because this feels, even though it doesn't feel as precise and exciting as a Type R or a Fiesta ST, this feels unstoppable, that the other ones don't. One thing that I do find annoying in the STI, unfortunately, and maybe I'm doing something wrong with my feet, I don't know, maybe I have weird feet, but what I'm finding is that when I'm trying to heel toe downshift, I am kind of unable to do so, unfortunately, because my heel of the right foot, before it hits the gas pedal to give that blip of a throttle, I find that it hits the side of the footwell first. Like, the footwell is angled at a specific angle that it just, my heel hits it first, and I don't actually get to press the gas in with my heel, which is very, very annoying. So I end up just doing the regular heel downshifts. Woo! And now that we're back on loose surface, there's a lot of blind corners here. It's very concerning. But now that we're back on loose surface, automatically this just becomes so much much more fun. It just comes alive. It genuinely doesn't feel like it belongs in the streets. And as far as the general comparison of the competitors to the STI, it is natural to compare the STI to the Type R, to the Focus RS, to the even Veloster N or the Golf R. It is very natural, but what is important to remember about all these cars is they are all exceptional in their own areas. The STI is the unstoppable one, is the one that you will feel like you can go through anything. I think the Focus RS might feel like that as well, but I haven't had experience with the Focus RS personally, or the Veloster N. But the Type R, for example, the Golf R and Golf GTI, they are all excel in their own areas. The Type R is that street, that asphalt precision tool, that street machine, whereas the GTI and the Golf R are more refined. They're not as exciting, but they're nicer in the interior. They're better daily drivers, especially with the DSG. They're just kind of nicer overall, and they're more subdued. But whereas the STI is the unstoppable one, this is the one that can go through anything, and you might have to sacrifice some on-road performance or some interior goodies or just overall comfort. It is pretty stiff. It's not soft, it's not cushy. You don't have that amount of wheel travel that you see in rally cars. No, it is rally inspired, but it is quite stiff. One other thing that I forgot to mention somehow that I really don't like is the shifter. The shifter feel, the linkages, they don't feel very precise. The shifter feel is not very clicky and sharp. It's not very confidence inducing. Sometimes I'm wondering what gear I'm in, and I've never missed a shift or misshifted, but it feels like sometimes you do, and then you look off the clutch and you're like, oh, okay, we're good. But it's just not a very confidence-inducing shifting experience, honestly. And this is one of the weaker points for me for the STI. Even though allegedly this transmission can handle up to 800 pound-feet of torque without getting the transmission swapped up. So, you know, it does have its strengths and weaknesses, but the shifter feel is definitely not a strength for it. What I do like though is that you can actually shift fast, and the car doesn't punish you for shifting fast, like the WRX is known for, or the Civic SI. It doesn't have nearly as much rev hang. It just allows you to bang the gear in and just goes right in. There's no jerk, there's no lurk. It just feels very, very natural. You don't struggle. The transmission doesn't struggle to shift quick, which is very, very important and very, very satisfying. And before we end the video, I do want to talk about the daily drivability aspect of the STI. In the city, I didn't mind it at all. The clutch can feel a bit heavy for a daily drivable car. Sometimes it feels a bit heavy, and the bite point is a bit high for my liking, but it is a generally comfortable car to drive around, and the seats are pretty good. It's loud, of course, but we know that. That's the nature of it. And also, as far as the suspension, it's also kind of stiff, as I've already mentioned. So it does have its shortcomings, but at the same time, it's very practical. It can seat 5 people, and it's horrible on gas, as we might already know. 14 to 15 liters per 100 kilometers, which is absolutely horrendous, which is another point that I would give to the Type R. Much better fuel economy, especially since it's just all-wheel drive, but very similar performance on the street. Well, better, arguably. And for somebody who is looking for one car that can do it all, I think the STI is a fantastic option, honestly. It is good enough at everything, and it absolutely excels off the pavement. And that's gonna be about it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for subscribing. Honestly, it helps so much, so much. So please go ahead and do that. Maybe click the bell to get notified when I'm releasing a new video. And stay safe, stay well, don't stop smiling, and most importantly, never stop driving. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.